Welcome everyone. It is the top of the hour, 11 a.m. here on the U.S. East Coast, 8 a.m. Pacific, 5 a.m. Hawaii, and if I've got my math right, about 5 p.m. Central European time. So wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us and welcome to this Calling All Systems. Calling All Systems is an INCOSE initiative to gather thought leaders from around the world to talk about a key topic of interest. And our topic today is sustainability. Obviously, a headline topic, a critical topic for the world today and the world going forward. My name's David Long. I'm the INCOSE Director for Strategic Integration. I'll be the host, and the good news is you won't be listening to me. You're going to listen to 5 fabulous panelists. Let me introduce them very, very briefly. Jeff Michelina is from the Hawaii Climate Coalition. He's a climate and social impact strategist who has led sustainability organizations for over 2 decades. Gerhard Krinner is a senior scientist at Centre National de Recherche Scientifique, where he focuses on polar climate, in particular aspects of past, present, and future polar climate change that have global consequences. Matthew Kamehameha Lynch was a founding board member of the Hawaii Green Growth. There he played a key role to launch the state of Hawaii's Aloha Plus Challenge statewide sustainability dashboard. That's been recognized internationally as a model for localized implementation of the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. He's recently stepped back from public service to recenter his life around family, the arts, and various land back initiatives, returning indigenous lands to indigenous hands. We have Sky Matthews, who I believe you've seen before on a previous Calling All Systems. Sky is a distinguished engineer and the Chief Technology Officer for the Engineering Lifecycle and Connected Vehicles arms at IBM, where sustainability plays a key role. And closing out the panel is an INCOSE expert. Jennifer Russell is the program and management support leader on Garver's water team. She's also the Smart Cities Initiative Chair for INCOSE. So thank you all for joining us. In support, you'll see a number of names behind the scene. We have Honor Lind, Barclay Brown, Tom Strandberg, and then members of the INCOSE marketing team, Emma Joe, and George. They're going to be helping us with chat and Q&A throughout. I would encourage you in the chat, put your name, where you are, what time it's from, introduce yourself. Keep a very vibrant side chat going. Thoughts that you have about what you're hearing at the panel, I will watch that. But if you want to ask a question of the panelists, I would encourage you to put it in the Q&A tool. That's what I'll primarily focus on. Now, I'm going to maintain moderator's prerogative and really go with the flow. This is going to be a dialogue, not really a panel, but I look forward to your contributions as well. Let's get rolling. So, panelists, here's the question to start us out. Sustainability is a very, very broad topic. It's critical to today's world, to tomorrow's world. But as I said, it's very, very broad. What does sustainability mean to you? Matthew, as the opening keynote from IS 2023, where you talked about cultivating emergence for transformative change, let me have you open it up for us. What does sustainability mean to you?
Well, thank you, David. Yeah, this is a question. It's a question for 10 years as a sustainability professional. We always somehow got back to it. And honestly, if I'm just being blunt, I think that the word itself actually lacks ambition. If I were to describe my relationship with my wife to you as sustainable, I don't know what that would convey about the nature of our relationship. So I wonder, what about words like regenerating, thriving, or flourishing? All of us here today, assuming you're members of the species Homo sapiens, are descended from ancestors who have literally lived within our planetary boundaries for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years. So I have also been wondering, what exactly is it that we are seeking to sustain? How might the superorganism that is our species humble ourselves to learn from 3.8 years, 3.8 billion years of research and development that is life on Earth, so that we might remember what we need to in order for our species to literally to retain our fitness to survival in a planetary context. And in light of those wonderings, I've also been wondering that, given the challenges of today, what are actually the questions that we should be asking?
Great way to open us up, Matthew, with some key context and some key questions as well. Gerhard, let's transition to you. Gerhard Krinner delivered the opening keynote this year at the Europe, Middle East, and Africa Workshop and Systems Engineering Conference, where the theme was sustainability. Gerhard, what does sustainability mean to you?
Well, thank you, David. Well, for me, as a climate scientist, you won't be surprised to hear that sustainability is, I often see sustainability from a very small point of view as climate, a sustainable climate, a climate limited to a warming that allows us to limit damages and limit negative impacts on humanity and ecosystems. That is the obvious point of view that immediately comes to my mind when I think of sustainability. But of course, there are many other aspects, and climate itself is tightly linked to other aspects, many other aspects of sustainability. For example, ecosystem health. Healthy ecosystems help us to better attain climate targets. For example, we won't be able to limit climate change to 1.5 or 2 degrees or whatever if ecosystems are completely destroyed and don't help us to sequester a substantial amount of carbon. That is one obvious link, but there are many other links. And there's that concept that we have been insisting on in the IPCC synthesis report, which I have been coordinating in part, which is the concept of climate resilient development pathways, which are defined by integrating adaptation and mitigation to advance sustainable development for all. We have, and the for all here is really important, we have to take everybody on board here. We can't just say we have to save climate, if I may say like that, without taking everybody on board, without making sure that those who suffer most from climate change can really contribute and don't suffer also from the measures that we have to take to limit climate change. Thank you.
Thanks, Gerhard. Sky, your thoughts?
Yeah, so sustainability is such an interesting topic because we all wear, I think, many hats that, each one would have a different perspective on sustainability. So there are a lot of really deep experts on this panel, and I'm going to focus my comments on what that means to me as a systems engineer or a provider of tools supporting systems engineer. And that's really that sustainability is such an interesting challenge from an engineering perspective because it's not a sort of single problem space. It really requires a holistic view. So as a pragmatic example, the reason that we are transitioning towards electric vehicles is not just to stuff 1,000 pounds of batteries in a car instead of gasoline. There's an implied goal to reduce the carbon footprint of the vehicle, but that's only true if the actual energy source providing the electricity for that vehicle is in fact more carbon friendly than the gasoline was. So that's a kind of holistic view that we are not necessarily used to thinking of when we're, for example, engineering products or systems. And so that's going to put some challenges on how we design, how we think about, the systems that we are engineering, to be more sustainable. And of course, that could mean many different characteristics. So, understanding exactly which of those sustainability characteristics we want to prioritize, what the unintended consequences of the technology choices that we're making to try to do that, might be. We might be causing a bigger problem downstream than we're actually solving. So that's a really different mindset. And I think it's going to take some focus and some time for us as a system engineering community to really, develop that thinking and that set of practices to build ultimately more earth-friendly, products that are helping us as a species, make a better relationship with our planet.
Thanks, Sky. And, systems engineers, we often talk about a different mindset. We talk about the systems mindset, but you just talked about a different variant of that mindset there. Thank you very much. Jeff, at the IS, you delivered an invited session, No Lifeboat, Climate Lessons from the Middle of the Pacific. So you are your own ecosystem in many ways for sustainability. What does it mean to you?
Thanks, David. And it's great to be here with everyone this morning. I really appreciate the opportunity and appreciate that these gentlemen went first, because they pretty much, covered all the aspects. Matt covering the regenerative nature of sustainability, and Gerhard and Sky really talked about this systems approaches. And if I could dig in a little bit more into the example that Sky shared about electric vehicles, not only looking at the full life cycle of that vehicle and making sure that it's something that can be sustained given our resources and our limited budget of carbon in the atmosphere, but then thinking of the systems beyond that, how the electric vehicle interacts with our energy grid, the social systems, Gerhard, that you talked about, making sure everyone can access a vehicle like that. So we're actually solving the problem for everyone. I think in Hawaii, our imagination has unfortunately been sharpened about climate given the disaster in Maui. But thinking longer term, how can electric vehicles help us build a more robust system where we can have microgrids that are use the benefit of electric vehicle batteries to be able to island and empower a small community using those batteries? So really thinking more broadly like that. I've recently been fascinated with this concept, not so much of resilience, but of this idea that Nassim Taleb has of anti-fragile, where you're not just building a robust or resilient system, but one that actually is stronger in disorder and disruption. And that is unfortunately the world we're entering with climate. Are there systems that we can build that are not just resilient, but actually can gain from the disorder and come out stronger? And there are a lot of examples of that in nature that we could emulate.
Great. Thanks. Anti-fragile. We'll add that word to the conversation because it needs to be there. Jennifer, bring us home. What does sustainability mean for you?
Yeah, thanks. Gosh, and Matthew, Sky, Gerhard, and Jeff, you guys laid out so many great examples of sustainability and some of the solutions that we're seeking to find these days. And as I was listening to you, I just feel that talking about sustainability is like jumping into a pot of honey. You just put your whole body in there and bring up your arms and your legs, and it's all kind of stuck together, but at the same time still fairly delicate, right? Because you don't want to break those connections. So Jeff, I love your idea of anti-fragile. And from our smart cities perspective, we're looking at the whole city. And as we are looking at the whole city as a system, each part of the city has its own set of systems and practices and behaviors and solutions. And identifying those interconnectedness between those systems within the city is really where I think, have a lot of opportunities. And there's so much that can get lost in between those spaces. That sustainability to me is almost how do we keep that sense of the pot of honey? How do we keep that sense of connectedness and understanding of that delicate nature of what we're all doing, and yet make that anti-fragile so that it's robust and supportive.
Thanks, Jennifer. So you lay out together some daunting challenges, some great words here: anti-fragile, the interconnectedness, the interdependencies, regenerative, etc. You've highlighted the fact that we recognize that we're in a much more interdependent world than we ever knew before. Well, we're talking to a set of practitioners, engineers, leaders who are often responsible for building a thing. But this requires us not only to work at the technological level, but also policy and governance. How can we help create the necessary holistic awareness? How do we help people contribute at the higher levels?
I would love to jump on that. And, I think really from a systems engineering perspective, I think we are so uniquely suited to help people not only understand that connectedness, but to help them visualize it in simple ways that can unpack connections that people may not have thought about before. And I just really feel that our greatest challenge and our greatest contribution as systems engineers is to help inform that by just using our discipline and looking left and looking right and helping to bridge some of the gaps between domains that exist. They have to exist, but as much as those have to exist in their domain, we have to bring them out and help broaden that awareness.
Inform, awareness, connect the dots. Great, Jennifer. Others?
May I come in? Yeah.
Please.
Well, connectedness. There's so many examples of partial solutions that have been implemented and that led to bad results. So I wonder whether, basically showing these bad examples might help sometimes, like building dams where that won't be enough because it locks you into future more problems, or whatever. Electric cars massively used by in countries where electricity is generated by coal or whatever. That kind of examples might help also raise awareness.
Good. Through life awareness. Sky, it looked like you were going to make a comment.
I was indeed. One of the things, it's kind of a side point, I think, to what Jennifer was saying, but there's, at least as an engineering community, I think, one of the things that we've tended to do is focus on the technology and certainly, solving problems, but in the sustainability space, if I can paint it with that broad brush, a lot of the solution will also end up being driven by policies and government. And we have to make sure that our voices are heard in that process. And, we can end up making some terribly bad policy choices. I won't throw out any examples here, but I'm sure everybody can think of some that end up being sort of counterproductive to to the goals of making a planet that's more stable and habitable. So understanding our role, I think, in that process of making policy and influencing the public on understanding the effects of policy and the intersection with technology, those are things that we need to take on more as a challenge. And I think probably many of us have avoided the involvement in sort of those kinds of conversations because of the sort of political nature of it. But it's kind of time. We have to make sure that the voices are heard that understand systems thinking and that can contribute to a more effective set of policies.
Sky, let me build on that for a moment and play it back to the panel. One of the things that you're calling out, and Jennifer, you called out we have a gift to bring. We have a particular value in this systems thinking, systems approach interaction that we can highlight. But if we're not careful, we talk like we're talking to engineers all the time. And we have to listen and speak in a way that we can have an accepted seat at the table. I know many of you have worked at the policy level, or you've worked with engineers who have communicated effectively at that level.
Keep it simple. It was Einstein that said things should be as simple as possible and no simpler, I think. And I have a good friend who's a practitioner in the food systems space. He has a saying that really stuck with me. And it's almost a guiding principle. And he says, when you're butting your head up against like a problem that you're having difficulty to solve, put it in a bigger box, zoom out and try to understand the systems that it's nested in, right? And Sky, I'm gonna pick up on something that you said, not to pick on you, but just to show how it reveals the sort of dominant paradigm that shapes all of us, myself included. And the words that you said is to create a planet that is more habitable. For us to create a planet that is more habitable. I just read over the weekend, there was a new report that came out talking about our species exceeding yet another planetary boundary. And so the evolutionary reality is that there are consequences anytime a species exceeds the carrying capacity of its environment. So for me, the way that, just to say it in simple terms, like, let us speak to the reality of the situation. And really, it's not us saving the planet. It's not us creating a more habitable. It is us adapting and evolving so that we can retain fitness to our environment to continue to.
That's actually a really useful point right there, right? As engineers, we also have to learn the right language and vocabulary and change our own ways of thinking. In fact, Marcel gave a really great comment in the chat there, which I strongly agree with, and that's that. Try and find it again. So Marcel wrote, "We as engineers tend to jump to conclusions instead of looking for the real problem," and this is taught to us from our very early years at school. We have to change that in order to get ourselves more sustainable. And so I do agree strongly with that, right? The way that we were taught as engineers to problem solve, really tends to focus on a specific kind of problem and not often to encourage us to step back and look at what the bigger problem is and to think about other mindsets, other ways to approach the issue at hand. So great comment. Thank you.
I also come in 1 second. One pitfall, well, engineers don't fall into that pitfall that often, but one pitfall is to create fear and to think that that will help motivate people. Actually, it paralyzes. So activists who say this is the end of the world are not helpful. Research, for example, in climate clearly shows that we have the solutions available to remain below 2 degrees, to remain close to 1.5 degrees. So that's the important point to show. The solutions are often technological, not only, but part of them is. And that's important to show. Don't paralyze people.
Yeah.
I'll just build on that a little bit. After it's been 25 years now of working mostly at the state legislative level here in Hawaii on policy work and coming at it as a systems engineer by training, I think there are a lot of tough lessons for me in terms of communication and advocacy at that level. And certainly, fear-based messages don't always move people. And I think this is something where engineers can really bring a different perspective and one of really abundance when it comes to solving these challenges. Because there are just so many opportunities out there. And really engineers are the folks that can, lay it out and show what's possible as we go forward. And one quick example of that, as advocates, we were looking at Hawaii's energy system and really asking ourselves, what are we optimizing around? And at the time, we had a goal of 30% renewable energy by 2030. This is about a decade ago. And that seemed pretty ambitious for a system that was in the single digits. We've realized we don't have any fossil fuel in Hawaii, and we have every opportunity to do more than that. So we proposed a goal of 100%. And that was, quickly laughed out of the room because our, narratives and our mental models just said, you can't run a modern economy on nothing but the sun and the wind and the water. But we really relied on some engineers from University of Hawaii and some folks from Stanford that helped as well, just to model what it looked like. And there was a breakthrough that happened at the utility because they'd never really run those scenarios before. And as soon as you start taking the big thermal units offline, it opens up all sorts of new ways to do it. We couldn't do it immediately. We set a goal that was 25 years down the road, but nonetheless showed that it was possible and really changed the thinking around the challenge that we faced. And again, this is, to me, one of the best examples of engineers really showing if we come from abundance and possibility, we can change the narratives around some of these big challenges we face.
Jeff, I love the mindset shift. I often frame that people think engineers are pessimists because we work with margins. I like to frame engineers as optimists because we see a better future. And your framing of abundance there is perfect. I'd like to circle back, Sky. You called out Marcel's comment in the chat, and I'd like to build on that for a moment because Marcel's exactly right. All of us as humans tend to jump into the solution space. It's also true for engineers. It may be particularly true, but we do it as well. But Einstein famously said, if I had an hour, I would spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. If we take that Einstein quote to heart and say, hold on, are we thinking about the problem correctly? Are we asking the right questions when it comes to sustainability? Or more importantly, what's the question we should be asking that we aren't?
Now, David, I'll jump in. And the piece that we keep hearing that's not specifically listed in many sustainability discussions is the human. What about the human and those people? And so often we start to talk about technology, and I'm going to call Marcel out again, who's my co-chair on the Smart Cities Initiative, brought to light that our definition of a smart city has the humans at the center, and that city is really meeting the 9 fundamental human needs, and the technology should be in place around those 9 fundamental human needs. But if we start approaching some of our challenges from that perspective and break it down into which of these fundamental human needs are we impacting, and how is this solution going to impact that may help some of the discussions.
I can say one more word. Thank you. There's a word that most of us forget or like to forget, that's sufficiency. Asking the question whether something is really, really necessary. You've been talking about fundamental needs, Jennifer. Many things we want to improve are actually not really necessary and create more waste, more energy use, more resource consumption. So that is one thing we should never forget, is something really, really necessary. That concept of sufficiency, avoiding the resource use first before thinking of a better technological solution is, well, technology can help avoid use, but yeah, you know what I mean. It's a word that sometimes raises eyebrows. That is important.
No, Gerhard, thanks for bringing the word sufficiency in, because that's exactly what I was going to ask about. So that's perfect. Jennifer, when you triggered on the 9 areas, sufficiency in those areas, And it also keys off a question that Richard Beasley asked, reflecting on sustainability defined as a balance between environment, society, and economy, which is largely a problem of conflicting requirements. So let's follow that thread a little bit further. Oftentimes, a lot of the conversation about sustainability seems to turn on the trade-off between short-term and long-term thinking. Jennifer, in Smart City, you put the human at the center. Gerhard, you raise sufficiency, but then there's that time horizon as well. Many of our structures really seem to drive short-term results. Me prioritizing the price I pay for a commodity, my immediate comfort in the moment. Am I warm? Am I cool? What am I doing to my thermostat? An organization's quarterly performance against whatever the financial market projected. And so oftentimes the structure drives us towards immediacy, favoring the short term, creating actions that are harmful for the long term. So are we just left to make humans more altruistic, willing to be sacrificed, to sacrifice in the short term? Or are there other structures that can help drive the mindset and behaviors that are necessary for sustainability?
Say I don't know the answer to that. But it sort of rings a bell of interesting conversation I had with my daughter when I first told her I was getting involved in some working groups on sustainability and engineering for more sustainable products. And her eyes kind of lit up in a way that none of my work descriptions ever had that kind of effect on her before. So for a change, she didn't glaze over when I talked about work. And that is certainly something that is incredibly meaningful to the younger generation. That they want more meaning in their work. And I think they are more willing to, let's say, engage in those trade-off discussions head on, where, perhaps us older, stuck in our ways type folks are sort of more used to probably prioritizing, the sort of economics and the practical over the ambition of saving the planet. And so, that's certainly something I am learning from them. And I think we would like to embrace that ambition and to bring them into the conversation and into the workforce with that kind of passion. So that's certainly something that I took away from that conversation, and have since tried to find in the people that we are hiring, to look for more of that passion, that more of that willingness to make those hard trade-offs.
I know that. Yeah, go, Jeff. I was hoping you'd chime
Oh,
in.
no.
No, please.
I was just going to quickly respond to what Sky said, because humans are tricky species, and we discount the future at incredible rates. We also discount by distance. I was just feeling this the other day, reading about the tragedy in Libya, and it's like when lives are lost across the world, it is a different feeling than if lives are lost on an island next door to us. We do this discounting all the time, but the example you raised right now, Sky, when you have children, it's a different story. You do anything in your power to make sure that they have a livable, sustainable future. So how do we connect those dots and try to really bring out those feelings and those actions that are altruistic in thinking about, at least thinking about your own genes, the next generation, but as a species. And I think there's some systemic ways we can do it. The easiest is really, through policy, sort of choice architecture, setting up just the other thing that humans are also incredibly lazy. So making sure that the choices that they make are, the easy one is the right one for the long term. And, the more difficult one is not so sustainable. We often flip that around for convenience. And then one very specific example, again, getting back to Hawaii and thinking about our electric utility. The electric utility was in a real crunch as more and more customers got rooftop solar and then batteries. and looking at how they had to move, into this 21st century system. The old model of essentially a cost plus, system where they got covered for everything they spent money on plus about 10%, wasn't really going to serve us. It wasn't going to serve us for our climate goals or really our customer goals or our high cost of electricity. So we did something novel in Hawaii and put together a new sort of system to align, customer and societal goals with stakeholder or shareholder goals called performance-based rate making, where they're really regulated on a long-term based on outcomes of, lower bills, reduced carbon emissions, higher reliability, better customer service, as opposed to a more blunt instrument, which is just tell us how much money you spend and we'll give you that plus a little. So that's a deeper system that we can work, but these are at the policy level to really force us to think longer term.
No, Jeff, I love that. I love the policy level, but you also cycle back to what Jennifer was talking about. We have to embrace the human and understand the psychology and the sociology. There are threads that we can pull on that aren't necessarily altruistic. We just have to know to pull on them, which requires engineers, technologists, and leaders to think about people. Matthew, you were going to make a comment.
I just love the choice of the word choice architecture. And I suspect that systems engineers in particular are well equipped to help us focus on that, because the reality is that there's a vast headwind or maybe constraint by the legacy systems that we've inherited. And I'm speaking specifically about how decisions are made in public policy, for example. The command control methods of decision-making date back to at least Roman times, if not before, and they are sorely under-equipped to be able to deal with the complexity and the scale and the magnitude of the challenges that we face in these times. Going back to the timeframes as well, so in the short term or the immediate, how might we improve that choice architecture so that we can make better decisions and deal with in real time the increased complexity, scale, scope, magnitude, etc. Simultaneously, how do we shift our paradigmatic thinking to recognize, like back to what our ancestors knew, which was 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 generation thinking, and literally making decisions today for souls yet unborn, right? And I think the way to do and to hold that tension and act on that tension of the immediate and the future simultaneously, you must start in the present. And I feel we must start with really addressing the ways that those decisions are made at that high level.
Interesting comment, Matthew. I'll say that I don't have grandchildren yet, but actually their future is a greater pull on me than my children's future, which is a very odd bit, but I think it's somewhat hardwired. If you guys don't mind, I want to try to get practical, but I may get overly practical. So if we need to zoom out, let's do it. But Sky, it's picking on your daughter lighting up on the topic of sustainability, and then Jeff, Matthew on the choice architecture. Back in July, 750 individuals from around the world chose to gather in Honolulu to advance the best in systems engineering. Now, we did part of that in pursuit of INCOSE's vision, a better world through a systems approach, which includes the area of sustainability, but we did so at clear environmental cost. The shortest trip is a 6-hour flight. When you think about events such as that gathering that are clearly a trade-off, when you think about bodies such as INCOSE or the IEEE and others, how would you guide us in that choice architecture to best work towards a better future?
David out there asking the easy questions. Thanks for that softball.
Doing my best.
Yeah, really interesting question. I can maybe beg off that. I didn't end up coming to Hawaii for medical reasons, but but I certainly personally would have loved to. But that putting that choice architecture in the broader perspective, is that really, is that really the right thing to do? Could we have achieved the same objectives with, more virtual attendance? And virtual has trade-offs as well, but certainly the footprint is unquestionably lower. I suspect those are hard questions that we have to start facing and asking ourselves, as a community, are we really demonstrating the leadership there in making that choice? And I think most of us would probably say the answer might be no. That we should be considering other ways of building this community and establishing these kinds of events.
If I may, thank you, Sky, for taking a stab at that. Not a easy question. It was a question that came up in a sort of LinkedIn discussion thread in the wake of the keynote that I had the opportunity to share. And I think there's a technical answer to this, which is fairly simple, and that is to calculate what the emissions are and then to figure out how to offset that. We don't have to get into the intricacies of carbon offsets. When they are done well, they can have positive impacts, and also obviously, like anything, they can also be done poorly. So with the rigor of the systems engineering community, I'm sure that it's well within INCOSE's capacity to figure out and make a really intelligent decision there. From the human perspective, and this was something that was really nourishing and inspiring to me, the relationships that we created as a result of being in person. And specifically, the handful of relationships that I created with some of INCOSE's organizing team, who literally took the time out of their busy schedule to do all of that prep, to come into the forest behind me, to learn firsthand from our lands, from our people, from our work to restore the ecosystems of these islands, has created a deepened human relationship, through these select individuals with the entire organization now, that if David or anyone for that matter in your community now reaches out to ask me personally if I can support your work in any way, I feel like we're family now. And that, to me, that sense of connectedness, that sense of mutualism, that sense of exchange and reciprocity and growing and learning together is invaluable. And it is what we will need to be able to rise to the challenges of these times.
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? Is that kind of effect is very difficult to quantify. So we could certainly quantify the carbon emission, but can we quantify that the impact of connectedness? Not really. It's very difficult.
So Sky, since you claim I like to throw softballs, I'll keep lobbing them in, but I'm going to pull another thread on something that's hard to quantify. I'm going to stay in July in Hawaii, but Jeff, I'm going to connect back to your opening comments, which harken back to the wildfires on Maui that wiped out Lahaina. As we think of those events, what would you say from a sustainability perspective, also in this choice architecture framework, in terms of avoidance, preparation, but also that inevitable call in the aftermath to build back better? What would we say from a sustainability perspective, thinking about Maui and Lahaina?
I'm looking around here, but I guess maybe since Matt, you just spoke, it's challenging, and it's such a tragedy. And I come back to that idea of fragility and then being anti-fragile, and how can we really think of the systems? There's a strong pull right now to just build back, do something, go back to where we were. You look at a place like Lahaina, and a good chunk of it is within the 1 meter sea level rise exposure area. So there is no going back necessarily from a physical way. So there's some, I think it's a good pause to really think about what, how we want to be and develop as a community. Someone mentioned climate resilient development previously, and really using, I hate to say as an example, but really using the lens of what happened as okay, can we use this as a model going forward for all of our, coastal communities, thinking about climate resilient development. And then hopefully this idea of, anti-fragile systems that are really designed to withstand and gain from the disorder that we're going to see with climate change.
Add one word of caution. Not everything that happens is due to climate change. Some catastrophes would have happened without climate change. I just wanted to make sure that as a IPCC member, I have to say that also from time to time. There are, of course, many extreme events we know have been predicted to increase in frequency and intensity, but not everything that happens is immediately due to climate change. I just wanted to add that.
That is actually a really good point. It's a really good point, because in this case, climate impacts were like the non-specific amplifier, right? The unprecedented, like winds that had not been experienced before. But if we say, no, it's climate change that caused it, we actually miss the larger historical context of land and power abuse through settler colonization in Hawaii, that in all of these multiple, long-term sort of cascading, or not even cascading, like incremental changes that all add up towards this tipping point, and the perfect conditions were created for an absolute disaster. Not unpredictable, nonetheless shocking, and something that we can hopefully learn from.
Yeah, again, the entangled bit. Matt, Sky, you were offering a comment there as well?
Well, I guess the one outcome we can, take from that is to understand and learn from, and be able to use that learning to design not just the the immediate technological solutions, be it power delivery or whatever, but also the systemic solutions that Matthew was pointing to there. So it's horrible, of course. None of us wish it, but we can learn from it.
And hopefully, Jennifer, also to build it back in a smart city type way, as opposed to an evolutionary, Matthew, you called out very clearly. This is a series of evolutionary steps that led to the state of Maui,
right?
Which led to the wildfire, not any one thing.
Yeah, the point being, it would be a mistake to just classify it as climate change. Oh well, let's figure out how to fix the climate. No, there's many contributing factors, and all of those things could be done better from a systems design perspective.
Yeah. Gerhard, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that one way that we can learn is from negative examples and highlight them. Earlier this year, there was in the mainstream media a series of articles about rooftop solar in California, specifically the fact that 20 years ago, there was a very popular incentive program that led people to place rooftop solar on their residential homes. But then as these panels approached end of life this year, they realized they weren't recyclable. And so these rooftop panels that were deployed in the name of sustainability, particularly green energy, are now a tremendous sustainability problem, because nowhere in California can you recycle them. Only 2 plants in Arizona are willing to handle them. So it reflects the fact that sustainability is both a combination of acts of omission, things that we're failing to think about, but acts of commission, errors that we're making because of our actions. If you think about what we're doing today, what are you worried about showing up in mainstream media 15 or 20 years in the future, with them looking back saying, we shouldn't have made that error, we should have known better?
That's a tough one, because I have no crystal ball. But there's a concept of maladaptation, for example. Maladaptation are measures that are seen as adaptation, temporary adaptation to climate change in that case, that lock us in to further more investments in the future, like building a dam in a place where you know that when you have built the dam temporarily, you think, oh, you're safe. You can build new infrastructures behind that, and when the sea level rises further, then the damage that is incurred by the sea level rise is even higher. So there's a lot of research going today into maladaptation, and again, I've been giving the iconic example of dams, but there are some others. I'm not a specialist of adaptation, though, but indeed, there are lots of them, probably. Yeah, and it's hard to predict, and we have to learn. I mean, if we don't do anything, that's the biggest error we can make. We can make errors like the rooftop solar panels you've been talking about, but I think it would even be worse to do nothing. It would be much, much worse to do nothing. That would be the worst error. Thank you.
I would love to identify and acknowledge the rate of technology change that we're experiencing now as well. And the fact of the matter is we are going to make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes hand over fist. And especially with increasing opportunities to try new things. I think, Gerhard, you said it perfectly. To do nothing would be far worse. And at some point, maybe we just need to start building into our plan a little bit of margin to deal with the errors that we make, because otherwise we can't move forward. And certainly the deployment of those solar panels in mass built a culture and understanding, a generational behavioral pattern to accept and be willing to source renewable energy. And that benefit that those kids who are now 20 years old, who are going into the world, they're going to be far more comfortable and they're going to look for those kinds of opportunities. Meanwhile, the technology of those solar panels is able to advance, and now we've learned and we can develop those sustainable practices. And now we really have something that we can roll out at large scale and really make a difference.
Can I just add one little thing here?
Mhm.
I think the urgency we're in now is necessarily going to be a source of more errors. If you have to do things urgently, if you have to act urgently, you make more errors. And unfortunately, we are in that urgency now because we haven't acted soon enough, like 30 years ago. Also, we knew everything would be coming.
I worry about that greatly, and I mentioned that up front. The unintended consequences. When we think about doing things like carbon removal, or putting particulate in the air to reflect heat. There are a lot of things that we could do that may have some serious consequences that need to be studied.
So let me build on that and give each of you a chance to make a closing comment, but I'm gonna bound you a little bit. So we have a very diverse audience today, but with INCOSE as our convener, it wouldn't be right if I didn't ask a systems engineering question. We heard that technology is moving fast. We heard that we have to be willing to make mistakes. We heard, Sky, we have to be careful about unintended consequences because they can happen at scale. These are definitely systems engineering questions. If each of you could offer one challenge or one charge to our systems audience, what would it be? Jen, you want to start us as our resident systems engineer? I'll pick on you.
I do. I'm so excited. I really feel that we as systems engineers need to practice talking outside of our domain. We have to practice influencing and helping inform the communications within our communities, because if we can start to do that, then we can start to make shifts in understanding, then we can start to make shifts in policy and that perception. And all of that is all connected together. And I know no better group of people than our systems engineers to do that. So I challenge everybody once a week, talk to somebody who's a non-systems engineer and explain an interface that they might not have thought about previously.
Very good. Thanks, Jennifer. Go ahead, Jeff.
I'll gladly build on that, Jennifer, and say even engage in policy, because this is right now we're really constrained with time when it comes to our climate challenge, and we have to act quickly. And again, systems engineers can bring that perspective of the solution set of abundance, and this way of thinking, and those possibilities need to be heard. Unfortunately, policymakers can be very one-dimensional, and they need to, think with a systems sort of way. And we're in a race right now. I forget who said it, but a race between Armageddon and awesome. And so, to the extent that the systems engineers can bring that awesomeness and say, "Hey, there's so much potential here," but yes, they need to hear from others than status quo.
Great. Optimistic, abundance, and awesome. I got that from you, Jeff. And anti-fragile. I got that from you today. Sky?
I'll throw it out that so I'd love to see the system engineering community borrow something from the open source software movement, and that is to make more of our engineering models and artifacts available to the broader community to borrow from. So for example, can we take SysML models of, some sustainable system that we've worked on and make those publicly available for other people to inspect and examine and borrow from and build on? I think the whole, space would benefit greatly from that, but I haven't seen that happen very much.
Different open collaborative model. Great, Sky. Gerhard.
Yeah, I think as I said already in Sevilla, as system engineers, you are uniquely placed to have that integrated view. You are the anti-partial solution people, right? And that's what we really need. Partial solutions that sound well, that are short-term, are probably the worst thing that can happen, or the second to worst thing next to doing nothing. So we really need your help in teaching people, helping people think of the integrated and solutions. And the problem is with interdependencies. We really need you.
Perfect. Harkening back to Jennifer's, highlighting that holistic interconnectedness. Matthew, the last word is yours.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed this conversation, really enjoyed the questions coming up in the panel. I'm a sort of self-described apocalyptimist. I know that it's like severe, but I'm also a motorcycle rider. And when you're in a turn, if you look at the tree that you don't want to hit, you wind up wrapped around it. So you look through the curve. And there's a beautiful collaboration between interface and biomimicry. I'm not affiliated with either of them, but they set this brief of factory as a forest, and they built and designed a factory that mimicked, that actually performed the same ecosystem services as the forest ecosystem that it was replacing. And I think that's such a beautiful example of what we are capable of when we unleash the human imagination by asking better questions. So that is my challenge to the genius collective that is the systems engineering, is let's ask better questions.
Ask better questions and don't wrap ourselves around the tree. Thank you, Matthew. We couldn't have asked for more from our 5 panelists, from the diverse perspectives and the expertise insights that they've shared. Thank you for leaning into the conversation. Thank you all for contributing to the chat. It's been very vibrant, the Q&A. I know we didn't get to so many of the contributions. This is part of the conversation, not the end of the conversation. The key is where we take it from here. So watch this space for more. For those who do enjoy the Calling All Systems sessions, there are 2 more coming up this year: Models in Space on October 18th, and the Future of Systems Engineering on November 17th, then bridging over into 2024. Thank you one final time, Matthew, Gerhard, Sky, Jeff, Jennifer, all the supporters behind the scenes, and everyone who participated. Have a great rest of the day.